Number: Royal Palace Security Crisis. The morning started, like any other, at Buckingham Palace. But by noon, everything had changed forever. Chief Security Officer James Morrison stood in his office, holding a classified document that would shake the very foundations of the royal household. The paper contained intelligence reports that had been building for weeks, and the conclusions were shocking. Camilla, the Queen Consort, had unknowingly become a security risk to the entire royal family. The investigation had begun 3 months earlier, when palace guards noticed unusual patterns in her daily activities. Small things at first: unexpected visitors, private phone calls in secured areas, and documents left unattended in restricted zones. What seemed like innocent mistakes were actually creating dangerous vulnerabilities in the palace's carefully planned security system. The breaking point came when surveillance cameras captured footage of Camilla accidentally leaving her security badge in a public area of the palace during a charity event. Within minutes, an unknown individual had photographed the badge's access codes. The security team realized that someone could potentially use this information to breach the palace's most protected areas. The implications were terrifying. Morrison knew he had to act quickly. But the decision would create chaos throughout the royal household. He called an emergency meeting with the palace's top security advisors, the king's private secretary, and representatives from Scotland Yard. The room fell silent as Morrison presented his findings and explained the gravity of the situation. The evidence was overwhelming. Security footage showed multiple instances where Camilla's movements had inadvertently compromised classified information. Her habit of discussing royal schedules in semi-public spaces, combined with her tendency to leave secure doors propped open, had created a pattern that hostile intelligence services could easily exploit. The security team had also discovered that some of Camilla's personal staff members had not undergone the most rigorous background checks required for high-level palace access. After hours of intense discussion, the committee reached a unanimous but painful conclusion. Camilla's security clearance would need to be immediately revoked, and her protection detail would be reassigned to someone who posed less risk to the overall security of the royal family. The choice was obvious. Princess Catherine had demonstrated exceptional security awareness and had never had a single breach associated with her activities. The decision created immediate practical problems. Camilla's daily schedule would need to be completely restructured. She would no longer have access to sensitive briefing rooms, classified documents, or secure communication systems. Her movements within the palace would be restricted to public areas and specially designated safe zones. The most skilled protection officers, who had been guarding Camilla, would now be responsible for Catherine's security. Morrison understood that this decision would create enormous personal and political complications. Camilla had been building relationships with her security team for years, and suddenly losing that protection would feel like a personal rejection. The media would inevitably discover the change and speculate about the reasons behind it. Palace communications experts were already preparing damage control strategies. The king was informed of the decision during his private evening briefing. His reaction was a mixture of disappointment and resignation. He understood the security necessities, but knew this would create significant tension within his family. The decision was not about personal preferences or family politics. It was purely about protecting the monarchy from potential threats that had become too dangerous to ignore. Meanwhile, Princess Catherine was quietly informed about her new security arrangements. She listened carefully as Morrison explained the situation and her new responsibilities. Catherine understood immediately that this change would bring both increased protection and increased scrutiny. Her every movement would now be monitored even more closely, and she would need to be extremely careful about maintaining the highest security standards. The practical preparations began immediately. Catherine's protection team was expanded with officers who had previously worked with Camilla. These experienced guards brought detailed knowledge of potential threats and sophisticated protection techniques. They began implementing enhanced security protocols that would govern Catherine's public appearances, private meetings, and family time. The palace staff were instructed to treat the security reassignment as a routine administrative change, but everyone understood the underlying implications. Servants, assistants, and advisors who had worked closely with Camilla would now need to adjust their procedures and communication patterns. Some staff members would lose their access to Camilla entirely, while others would gain new responsibilities supporting Catherine's expanded security needs. As news of the change spread through the palace's informal communication networks, speculation began immediately. Some staff members whispered about family conflicts, while others wondered if there had been specific threats against Camilla. The truth, that this was purely a security decision based on operational vulnerabilities, was known only to a small circle of senior officials. Camilla spent her last evening with full palace access, reviewing documents, and saying private goodbyes to spaces she might not see again. She understood the reasoning behind the decision, but couldn't help feeling hurt by the sudden change in her status. Tomorrow would bring a completely different reality, with restricted movements and limited access to the information that had helped her fulfill her royal duties. The security transition would officially begin at midnight, when new access codes would be activated and old clearances would be permanently disabled. Chief Morrison spent the evening reviewing emergency procedures and ensuring that every detail of the changeover would proceed smoothly. The royal family's safety depended on perfect execution of this sensitive operation. By morning, Princess Catherine would wake up to find herself at the center of the palace's most sophisticated security apparatus, while Camilla would discover that her role within the royal household had fundamentally changed forever. The implications of this decision would ripple through the monarchy for months to come, affecting everything from family dinners to state ceremonies. The transition begins. The next morning brought immediate and dramatic changes to daily life at the palace. Catherine woke to find 6 new security officers stationed outside her private quarters, each carrying advanced communication equipment and wearing the distinctive badges of the elite Royal Protection Unit. The officer in charge, Commander Sarah Mitchell, briefed Catherine on the new protocols that would govern every aspect of her day. Catherine's breakfast routine, which had previously been private and relaxed, now required security clearance for every person who entered her dining room. Her personal chef needed to verify ingredients with security staff, her assistant required additional background checks, and even her morning newspaper had to be screened for potential security threats. The changes were overwhelming, but Catherine understood their importance. Meanwhile, Camilla discovered that her morning routine had been completely disrupted. The guards she had known for years were no longer at their usual positions. New officers, less familiar with her preferences and habits, had taken their place. These guards were polite but distant, following strict protocols that felt much more formal than the comfortable relationships Camilla had enjoyed with her previous protection team. The most shocking change came when Camilla tried to enter her private office in the palace's administrative wing. Her security badge, which had worked perfectly the day before, now flashed red at the scanner. A new guard, looking uncomfortable but determined, explained that her access to that area had been restricted. Camilla would need to request special permission and be escorted by security personnel whenever she needed to retrieve personal items from her former workspace. Palace staff members were struggling to adapt to the new arrangements. Servants who had routinely carried messages between Camilla and other royal family members now found themselves stopped at security checkpoints they had never encountered before. Simple tasks, like delivering tea or collecting laundry, suddenly required multiple approvals and escorts. The efficient flow of palace operations was disrupted as everyone learned to navigate the new security landscape. Catherine's first official appearance under the enhanced security arrangement was a charity visit to a children's hospital in London. The preparation required 3 times as many security personnel as usual. Advanced teams had spent days examining every room, interviewing every staff member, and installing temporary security equipment throughout the facility. The hospital's normal operations were significantly disrupted to accommodate the extraordinary security measures. During the hospital visit, Catherine noticed how different everything felt with her new protection detail. The guards were more numerous, more vigilant, and more intrusive than she had experienced before. Every person who approached her was carefully screened, every movement was monitored, and every decision required security approval. While she appreciated the protection, Catherine couldn't help feeling somewhat isolated from the people she was trying to help. The media began noticing the changes within days. Royal photographers observed that Catherine's security detail had suddenly expanded, while Camilla's public appearances seemed to involve fewer protection officers. Newspaper reporters started asking questions about the reasons for these changes. But palace communications staff provided only vague answers about routine security updates and operational adjustments. Never redder. Alling marred. Never well. Never well. Never well. Behind the scenes, family tensions were building. The king found himself in the difficult position of explaining to Camilla why the security changes had been necessary, while also supporting Catherine in her new role. Family meals became awkward, as the new security restrictions meant that Camilla could no longer access certain dining rooms where sensitive conversations might take place. She had to be escorted to family gatherings and could no longer move freely through areas of the palace she had considered her home. Prince William was initially confused by the sudden changes to his wife's security arrangements. When palace officials explained the situation to him, he felt a mixture of gratitude for Catherine's enhanced protection and concern about the impact on family relationships. He understood the security logic, but worried about how the changes would affect the family's ability to spend private time together. The children, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis, were perhaps the most affected by the security transition. Their grandmother Camilla could no longer visit their private playrooms without security escorts, and their mother Catherine was now surrounded by guards during activities that had previously been relaxed and informal. Family game nights and casual conversations became more complicated as security personnel had to be present for most interactions. Camilla's public duties began to reflect her reduced security status. Events that she had previously attended independently now required her to coordinate with Catherine's security team. If both women were attending the same function, Camilla's movements were secondary to Catherine's protection requirements. This created practical difficulties and personal hurt feelings, as Camilla found herself being treated as a lower priority within her own family. The palace's administrative staff were working around the clock to implement new procedures. Document handling, meeting schedules, and communication protocols all needed to be revised to reflect the changed security arrangements. Staff members who had worked with Camilla for years suddenly found their access restricted, while others were promoted to work more closely with Catherine's expanded operation. International security agencies that worked with the Royal Protection Unit had to be briefed on the changes. Intelligence sharing arrangements, threat assessment procedures, and emergency protocols were all updated to reflect Catherine's enhanced status and Camilla's reduced clearance level. These changes rippled through law enforcement agencies across the Commonwealth and created additional diplomatic complications. The emotional impact on Camilla became increasingly apparent as weeks passed. She began declining some public engagements, citing schedule conflicts. But palace insiders understood that the real issue was her discomfort with the new security restrictions. The woman who had worked hard to establish her place within the royal family now felt like an outsider in her own home. Catherine, despite her enhanced protection, began experiencing the isolation that came with maximum security measures. Her ability to have spontaneous conversations, make unexpected visits, or simply walk through the palace without extensive planning was severely limited. The protection that was meant to keep her safe also created barriers between her and the normal human interactions that had always energized her royal work. The security transition was working perfectly from an operational standpoint, but the human cost was becoming increasingly clear to everyone involved. Palace officials knew that they had made the right decision for protection purposes, but they were also witnessing the personal pain and family disruption that resulted from treating security as the absolute priority above all other considerations. Number, consequences, and resolution. 3 months after the security reassignment, the full impact of the decision was becoming clear to everyone at the palace. The changes had successfully eliminated the security vulnerabilities that had worried intelligence officials, but they had also created new problems that no one had anticipated. The royal family was discovering that security decisions, even necessary ones, could have profound consequences for personal relationships and public perception. Catherine was struggling with the psychological pressure of being the family's primary security focus. Every public appearance felt like a major military operation, with dozens of personnel coordinating to ensure her safety. The spontaneity that had made her royal engagements feel genuine and personal was being lost in layers of security procedures. She found herself becoming more cautious, more formal, and less able to connect with the people she met during official visits. The breaking point came during a visit to a primary school in Manchester. Catherine had hoped to spend time reading with children and talking informally with teachers, but the security requirements turned the visit into a tense, overly orchestrated event. Children were frightened by the number of guards. Teachers felt unable to speak freely, and the natural interactions that usually made such visits meaningful were completely suppressed by security concerns. After the Manchester visit, Catherine requested a private meeting with Chief Morrison and the King. She explained that while she appreciated the protection, the current security level was making it impossible for her to fulfill her royal duties effectively. She proposed a more balanced approach that would maintain necessary security while allowing for more natural interactions with the public. Her arguments were compelling and demonstrated how excessive security was actually undermining the monarchy's public mission. Meanwhile, Camilla was developing her own strategy for adapting to the new reality. Rather than continuing to feel hurt by the restrictions, she began focusing on activities that didn't require high-level security clearance. She increased her involvement with charities, literary organizations, and cultural institutions that operated outside the palace's most sensitive areas. These activities allowed her to maintain her public role while working within the new security constraints. The media attention around the security changes was intensifying. Royal correspondents had noticed the patterns and were beginning to speculate about the reasons behind the reassignments. Palace communications staff were struggling to maintain the official story about routine updates, while managing increasingly specific questions about the changes in protection levels for different family members. A breakthrough came when an investigative journalist discovered information about the original security vulnerabilities that had prompted the changes. Rather than being embarrassed by this revelation, palace officials decided to be more transparent about the situation. They acknowledged that security concerns had necessitated changes to protection arrangements and emphasized that these decisions were based purely on operational requirements rather than personal preferences. The king, recognizing that the current situation was unsustainable, called for a comprehensive review of the security arrangements. He brought in external consultants who specialized in protecting high-profile families while maintaining their ability to function effectively in public roles. These experts spent weeks studying the palace's security needs and developing recommendations for a more balanced approach. The security review concluded that the palace had overcorrected in response to the original vulnerabilities. While enhanced protection for Catherine was justified, the restrictions on Camilla had been unnecessarily severe. The consultants recommended a tiered system that would provide appropriate security for each family member based on their specific roles, threat levels, and public exposure, rather than treating them as either maximum or minimum security risks. Palace officials implemented the new recommendations gradually. Catherine's security remained enhanced, but became less intrusive, allowing her to resume more natural interactions during public engagements. Camilla's clearance level was partially restored, giving her access to areas of the palace necessary for her royal duties while maintaining restrictions on the most sensitive security zones. Both women were provided with protection teams specifically trained to balance security needs with public engagement requirements. The changes in family dynamics took longer to heal. Camilla had felt deeply hurt by the sudden loss of access and trust, while Catherine had been overwhelmed by the pressure of enhanced security. Family meals remained somewhat awkward as everyone adjusted to new protocols, but gradually the relationships began to return to a more normal state. The king made special efforts to ensure that both women felt valued and supported in their respective roles. 6 months after the original crisis, the palace's security arrangements had achieved a better balance. Catherine's protection was sophisticated but less intrusive, allowing her to resume the warm, personal style of public engagement that had made her so effective. Camilla had regained enough access to feel comfortable in her own home while understanding that certain restrictions were permanent parts of her new reality. The incident had taught everyone important lessons about the relationship between security and family dynamics. Palace officials developed new procedures for implementing security changes that considered both operational needs and personal impacts. They established regular reviews to ensure that protection measures remained appropriate and effective without being unnecessarily disruptive to family relationships or public duties. The media eventually moved on to other stories, but royal correspondents continued to watch for signs of tension within the family. The transparency that had emerged from the security crisis actually improved public understanding of the challenges facing the royal family and the complex decisions required to balance personal safety with public service. Catherine emerged from the experience with a deeper appreciation for the security professionals who protected her family and a better understanding of how to work effectively within necessary restrictions. She developed strong relationships with her protection team and learned to maintain her natural warmth while respecting security protocols. Her public engagements became more successful than ever, as she found ways to connect with people despite the complex security arrangements. Camilla used the experience to refocus her royal work on areas where she could make the greatest impact. Her reduced security restrictions actually allowed her to pursue some activities with greater freedom, and she discovered new ways to contribute to the monarchy's mission. She maintained her dignity throughout the transition and earned respect for her graceful adaptation to difficult circumstances. The royal family ultimately emerged stronger from the security crisis. They had learned to communicate more effectively about difficult decisions, to consider the human impact of operational changes, and to adapt when initial responses proved to be inadequate. The incident demonstrated that even the monarchy could learn, adjust, and improve when faced with unexpected challenges. The security arrangements that resulted from this crisis became a model for other high-profile families facing similar challenges. The balance between protection and public accessibility that was eventually achieved allowed the royal family to fulfill their duties effectively while maintaining the safety measures necessary in an increasingly complex security environment.